Hey everybody, welcome to this instructional session. In this video, we're going to talk about one of my favorite and one of the most powerful sets of tools for understanding a story. It's metaphor, allegory, and symbol. Enjoy! A metaphor is just a way of describing something. It's a tool we use when we want to make a description. So a metaphor is a direct comparison for the purpose of description. It's when we literally say A is B. And again, our goal is not to trick somebody. Our goal is not to be cryptic. Our goal is to describe something. Here are some examples. Her eyes are diamonds. A is B. Her eyes, A, are diamonds, B. You're just another brick in the wall. You, A, are B, another brick in the wall. Let's see how we unpack a metaphor. First, label part A and part B. A is the thing being described. B is the descriptor. Her eyes, A, are diamonds, B. Next, we list the characteristics of B. Here, we write down what occurs to us. You cannot be wrong here. The idea is to honestly reflect on what you think about when you think of diamonds and write down those ideas. I thought of diamonds are rare, beautiful, cool, twinkly, precious, sharp, prismatic. It's just what occurred to me when I thought about diamonds. Step 3. We apply the characteristics of B to the metaphor. So, her eyes are rare, beautiful, cool, twinkly, precious, sharp, and prismatic. And that is how we unpack a metaphor. So as you can see, metaphors are inviting. They invite us to participate in the description process. They're dynamic. They can give us lots of different meanings at lots of different times, in lots of different ways. And they're relative. How a metaphor is interpreted depends on the person interpreting it. Therefore, there are no wrong answers. There are simply different answers. This makes metaphors fun and engaging, and they help us to develop a strong connection with what we're reading. Let's try another one. You're just another brick in the wall. First, we label part A and part B. A is the thing being described, and B is the descriptor. Here, we are using a brick in the wall to describe you. Step 2. We list the characteristics of B. Now, I encourage you to pause the video and actually do this. Write down what you think of when you think of a brick in the wall. When you're done, start the video again. When I did this, I started very simply, just some plain stuff, and then I kept thinking and came up with a few things that are more complex. Here's what I got. A brick is construction material. It is the same as all other bricks, simple and inactive. It does not think or react. It just completes its task at the command of a more able and intelligent being who is building something. So I just started somewhere. A brick is construction material. It's red. It's hard. And as I kept thinking, I came up with other, more interesting and more sophisticated characteristics of the brick. So now, take a moment to apply the characteristics of B to the metaphor. Pause the video and say it out loud. Here's what I got. You are construction material, the same as all others, simple and inactive. You do not think or react. You just complete your task at the command of a more able and intelligent being who is building something. Whoa, that's a lot to say in just one metaphor. A very powerful, if not somewhat pessimistic perception of who I am. One way to see how metaphors work is to try one on your own. Here are some A parts, and you provide the B parts. Again, no right answers here, but sometimes when we try to write a metaphor, we realize, oh, this is how this works, and it may not be as easy as I thought it was to come up with a good one. So, take a moment and try to create one for yourself. Let's move on to allegory. An allegory is just when we start with a metaphor and then we carry that metaphor through a story. And this for the purposes of description, for the purpose of describing some aspect of life. So an allegory is just a metaphor that is used throughout a story. Let's see how this works. In an allegory, a main component is representing something else. A is B. Most often there are multiple representations, and you might not be able to catch them all at the beginning. As an example, let's do The Wizard of Oz, the movie from 1939. Usually, most of my students have seen this, so it functions as a good example. Here are the main components of the story. You have Dorothy, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, the Lion, and home. Home comes up a lot. That's what Dorothy's trying to do, is get home. So we ask ourselves, well, what are these things representing? If each of these is a metaphor, A, then what are they, B? Usually the metaphors are pretty straightforward. Again, this isn't a trick or a game or a code to be cracked. If we're honestly trying to describe something to somebody, then we want it to be fairly clear. Well, who's Dorothy? Well, Dorothy is just the average girl. She's just a regular person. So we could say that Dorothy is the common person. You and me, the average Joe. The Scarecrow, he wants a brain. So it sounds like he's probably representing intelligence. The Tin Man, well, he wants a heart. So he sounds like compassion to me. And the Lion, well, he wants courage. So he represents courage. What about home? Well, that's not entirely clear to me. So let's leave that for a second and see where we can go with what we already have. The next step would be to recast the story with the substitutions in place and see what it tells us. In other words, retell the story, but change all the A's to B's. Here's what we get. The common person, so I took Dorothy and substituted it for the common person. The common person is uprooted from home, a place of comfort and safety, and sent to a strange and dangerous place. She goes on a journey to return home. During the journey, she finds intelligence, compassion, and courage. These things help her to return home. Being removed from home allows her to see how precious home is. When she gets home, she is different and home is different. She appreciates home more. So in recasting this story, I've replaced everything A is B, the Scarecrow with intelligence, the Tin Man with compassion, the Lion with courage, but I haven't replaced home yet. So what does home represent? Well, this brings us to symbols. Symbols are just road signs. They're just pointing our direction towards something important. Symbols don't have to be mysterious and strange and require years of research to understand. They can be very obvious and deliberate. They lead us down a path. They help us see the allegory. They help us to see the allegory. They stand out. So what symbols jump out at me when I watch The Wizard of Oz? Well, the sun jumps out at me. The sun is very bright. So I think, okay, when I think of the sun, I think of illumination and enlightenment. The yellow brick road jumps out at me. Also very bright, very noticeable. And that brightness makes me think of illumination and enlightenment. What else? The ruby red slippers, also very bright and sparkly. So again, I'm brought to this idea of illumination and enlightenment, all this light, all this glow, all this shine. Next, the Emerald City. You guessed it, very bright. I see illumination and enlightenment. Let me pause for a second to say that this is how I interpret it. This is not the correct answer or the only right answer. It's just my interpretation. Now, as I said, symbols are there to direct our attention, so they usually stand out. And you might ask yourself, the sun. Did that really stand out? Well, if we take a brief moment to go back to the beginning of the video, where Dorothy is on the farm and sings the famous song, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, the entire song is with the camera on Dorothy and Toto right there. It's a fixed shot. But at one moment, there's a cutaway right here. See how that jumps out at you? The sun and its beaming rays, enlightenment. It's a symbol for me and points me in the direction of the allegory. So I can now say, these symbols are pointing me towards something. I see. Home is not just home. Home is about illumination and enlightenment. What does that mean? That means home is about the meaning of life, about finding my true self, about my identity, my purpose. So being at home is being in a state of enlightenment where I know who I am and what I'm supposed to do. This starts to make a lot of sense. So now I recast the story again with all of the metaphors in place. And what do I get? In life, we are thrust into challenges. We must journey through these challenges to gain intelligence, compassion, and courage, which will aid us in overcoming the challenge. This experience will enlighten us. It will give meaning to our lives. It will tell us who we really are and what our true purpose is. Ironically, what we were looking for was there all along. We just couldn't appreciate it until we gained experience. Once you get used to looking for metaphors, allegories, and symbols, and you see these allegories and stories, you will see them everywhere. And they will really enrich your understanding and ability to connect with these stories. Here are 3 places in popular culture where you are very likely to find an allegory. The movie Star Wars, the album The Wall by Pink Floyd, which we referenced in the metaphor section, and the folktale Little Red Riding Hood. I would encourage you to see if you can find the metaphors and the allegories and the symbols that point you along the way. Enjoy.